Hello, hello. What's up? What's up? It is a new day, it is a new week, and it's time to get social. My name is Kayvana, and welcome to the Introverts Social Hour. Feeling stressed? Same. Enter Goli Ashwagummies, packed with KSM 66 ashwagandha to help you relax, restore, and unwind. Plus, they've got vitamin D for immune support. Because adulting is hard, but taking your daily gummies shouldn't be. Grab yours at Goli.com and use my code INTROVERTHOUR for 10% off. Once again, that's Introvert Hour for 10% off. Let's go. Hello, hello. Welcome to the Introvert Social Hour. My name is Kayvana, and today we are talking about building confidence through art. This is a follow up conversation with my friend Nicole, where last year we talked about like the confidence crisis. Specifically, the episode is titled "Crisis in Confidence." If you want to check it out from season 2, it's two parts, but we're continuing that conversation because it's a long journey. What we've discovered is a never-ending journey, and a year, while short, can also make a big difference. Good or bad. What I've discovered as well. So this is just a good catch up. As if we don't already talk to each other every week, but a good catch up in the sense of uh, like really digging deeper on this topic and how we are feeling in regards to where we're going, for the rest of this year. I feel like it's also really good too because as the year's kind of flying by, it's like a good check in of like potential goals you made. But yes, everybody, welcome back, Nicole. Hello, Nicole.
Hi.
um, so I kind of wanted to jump in and basically for the audience, for people who are listening, kind of go into like the recap of it all in a sense and like what we talked about, like where you were then and then where you feel like you are now, before we kind of jump into everything. So I am curious, in regards to that, how do you feel like you have changed since we have last spoken to each other in regards to where your art is now?
It's definitely interesting because it kind of comes and it goes. Like you said, it's not necessarily a linear journey on confidence. And I feel like in the last year, I have kind of had to put a lot of creative stuff on like the back burner. I've still always been doing it, but it's been a bit more of like, I need to, refresh my creative juices and kind of regroup on some of the stuff that I had in progress and figure out what my next moves were. And as far as confidence goes, I have had a lot of ups and downs. I feel like I've had some confidence lows and also some confidence highs where I'm like, kind of almost having an ego moment where I'm like, nobody understand. Like, just because they don't get it doesn't mean it's not good. It's like, it's a skill issue. It's not, it's an issue between the reader and the page, between the chair and the page. It's not like anything that I've put down. But and I'm kind of like, I think a little bit more okay with the up and down of it, kind of writing that, journey rather than trying to force it to be something that it's not, of kind of being a bit more realistic on like, where am I, what am I feeling right now as far as my confidence, because you can't really force that, like, and trying to can be a lot more detrimental than, just kind of meeting yourself where you're at when it comes to creativity and confidence. So it it feels like it's kind of been cyclical, but at the same time I do feel like there's growth because my mindset has changed, even though like the what exactly has happened in my creative journey doesn't look a whole lot different since last year.
Got you. Okay, I'm glad you answered that because that was actually going to be my next question of like, even though there's been like this up and down, do you still notice that even though it's up and down, there's still like this like steady growth that's happening, in that journey? It's very very interesting just because like I think we could get so in the moment of things that we don't even realize when we are making progress. I don't know if you feel that way in a sense. Like it's like, wait, hold up. I looked back and I didn't do that. Like, or like I did that, but I didn't think I would do that. Like
Mhm.
that was something that was a checklist mark. It's like so looking back, that could be kind of hard. But like that's progress, even though it doesn't feel like you're making any.
Yeah, especially
Yeah.
because I feel like it's really easy to just keep moving the goalposts for yourself. Where
Hmm.
if you, I go back to even a few years before our last conversation, there were a lot of things that I was like, oh, I could never do that. And then being able to put myself out there and try some new things. And now I look back on it and I'm like, oh, I can't believe like I didn't do that the perfect way, or I had to learn so much along the way. When it's like, yeah, you had to learn so much along the way because you'd never done it before. And now
Hmm.
I have more confidence with things like writing pitches and just talking about my own work as far as like writing material for it. But there's definitely a lot of areas where I'm still like, oh yeah, I don't. Whenever somebody in real life is like, hey, so like you said you were a writer, what do you write? I'm like, uh, um. So that is still something that's in progress, but I've definitely seen
Yeah.
because of the work that I've done with like writing material and stuff like that that has helped me have the language at least to stumble my way through the first couple of times where I'm like, no, I'm going to actually give this a
Mm,
try of giving
yeah.
an elevator pitch in real life.
Yeah, those are steps, and
Mhm.
those are, like, especially, like, the vulnerability of it all, those are, like, big steps. Um, and so I did wanna talk about, like, what other big steps have you taken in that creative journey that maybe, like, past you wouldn't have considered to take or, like, had a hard time taking?
Um, there's definitely been a lot that I think almost passed me by so quickly I didn't even realize. But
Mhm,
starting a journey of like researching what it means to query a book, what the traditional publishing journey looks like, and how difficult that is, and talking to a lot of other writers about what their experience is, especially with like I say the moment that the industry is in, even though it feels like this moment has been like 5 years long, where
mhm,
because of various factors in like art and the economy and stuff like that, it is a lot harder to break in than I feel like it was even a couple of years ago because
mhm,
there was really this big boom during COVID, and so there was a lot of people seeing some success, and then a really sharp not die off, but it's definitely like had the industry's had its ups and downs, and so getting to talk
mhm,
to other people and hear their feelings about it has also been helpful as well. And that was something I used to not really be a writing community kind of person, but that has really changed a lot. Um, like I said, writing promotional material, almost like thinking about your work in a different way of like, okay, I have past the mark of like I have finished a novel. I have written a novel. I've written multiple novels, but now it's
mhm,
like a whole different set of tools to be like, okay, so how do I explain this to somebody in one sentence, in two sentences? How do I write a 1,000 word synopsis? Because that is even now, like I think writing a tweet long pitch is easier than
mhm.
writing a one-page synopsis of a book. That is still my
Yeah, I could
biggest
see
like
that.
bear.
Yeah.
So I'm like, how do you do a whole book in one page? That's evil.
Mhm. And then you have to make sure you're using the right words to capture, like, the reader's attention. It's like, it's marketing, yeah.
Yeah,
It's yeah.
it's
I was
kind
thinking
of
about
wild.
that, like,
It's
SEO
mhm.
kind of vibes.
It challenges you to be like your own publicist and your own marketing intern and your own social media expert. It's
Mhm,
really it forces you to work a lot of creative muscles, but it's also really difficult starting to do that because you're like, what do you mean? Like I already did all the hard
mhm.
work, but no, it's the harder work comes after. And
Yeah.
uh, weirdly enough, I think doing some of that can also help with the creative process itself actually writing a query letter, which is again kind of one page. It's not a full synopsis of a story, but it's like a pitch that kind of takes you through the main conflicts of a story, the main characters, some of the stakes that you would be sending in like cold emails to literary agents and stuff like that.
Mhm.
Writing that actually helped me to understand the story itself, and I was able to go
Ooh.
back in different edits to be like, okay, now that I feel like I actually understand what the story is about, how do I emphasize that to make it stronger in those areas? So when I say in my
Mm.
pitch, this book is about X, Y, and Z, is it really delivering on that? So because that's what I had in mind, but I hadn't like put it into words so much. So now coming back to it to be like, okay, now what does it look like to really meet that expectation and exceed it that I've set?
Yeah. Oh, okay, that's cool. It's like a little backwards approach, to be
Yeah.
honest. Yeah.
And I've
I like
actually
that.
known some writers who, when they're a lot earlier in the process, they're starting to do some of that promotional writing, like first drafts of stuff. They're not pitching it yet or anything like that, but
Yeah.
it can really help you hone in on like, okay, I've got half a novel written. I think I know what it's about, but as far as driving things home, what is most important for this book? And sometimes the easiest way to do that is to kind of write it as if you're explaining it to another person and trying to be. be like, okay, this is what is most important for this book, and that can help you like
Mhm.
bring it all home in the end.
Which makes sense too because that's when you have to be your clearest.
Hmm. And it's
Externally, like, yeah,
the
that makes
subtext kind
sense.
of becomes text. So then you can kind of work backwards. So you're like, okay, now I've said out loud, like, this book is about, you know, coming of age or growing up or finding who you really are or defying what other people's expectations are of you. And then you go back to the book and you find, this is all subtext. How do I bring this forward in a way that it's like undeniably meeting that, eh, what you've written about it as far as the grander, what it's about?
Yeah. Um, I wanted to also like kind of like dive deep into I'm curious with that, those kind of sound like already like some breakthroughs and moments you've had in like learning curves. But I guess even if there are any more too, what moments have felt like breakthroughs in this last almost year, or probably a little bit less than that. Yeah.
I think weirdly it has felt both like a step forward and a step back recently. It's very much related to confidence. I have started coming around to being like, no, I don't think you're right about that. I used to take everybody's advice about everything. If somebody said, I don't really like this, could you do more of that? I'd be like, yes, of course. And now, especially because a lot of the things that people I'm like looking for feedback on are more finished pieces that I have a stronger understanding of what I'm trying to do. It's easier for me to assess that feedback and be like, that's not really fitting with my vision, or I don't know that this person really understands what I'm trying to do here. So even though the advice is still very useful, it's maybe not the most useful to implement in this story in this way. Because somebody can give their own advice, but past a certain point, it's like it's all taste, and you don't have to take every taste note. Especially, I've been dealing with this a lot in with like fantasy world building. People have very different preferences and wants and expectations when it comes to that world building, and the I'm learning that the way that I like to read is not necessarily a universal like approach to it. I don't mind something being a little bit denser. I don't mind having to work a little bit to understand something or like, read more than a paragraph or a sentence about a world to kind of get what's going on, especially for something like fantasy where like you do have to do some of that work. And being able to have a little bit of that wisdom and that confidence in myself to be like, okay, I understand that you want this to be simpler and more palatable for your taste. This book may not be for you. And also to try the I guess milestone is coming around to that and not then turning around and judging myself for being like, oh, you're being unreasonable, you're not taking feedback right, like those sort of things. No, I've come to an area of some maturity in what I'm trying to do with certain pieces where I can say the advice may be good, but it's not applicable here. Or this person is not a right fit for the book to give advice that is going to take it to where I want it to be. And that has been definitely a big milestone. Even though at first I was like, I don't know, I feel like I'm stepping back here and being too much in my head and too in my ego about it. But I think there is some maturity in that to be like, yeah, no, thank you, but thank you.
Yeah, that's so true because uh any creative field is very much like feedback culture. Um and what I've learned is like even like, fun fact, like even starting my new job, I had to do like this demo thing and I had like five people help me and give me advice. Everybody had something different to say. And even like people had opposite opinions on things to what led for success. And I was like, okay, well, obviously I'm going to have to choose in what makes sense to me because everybody's opinion is different or unfortunately opposing each other. So and I feel like that's such a big case scenario in creative fields because um, I could put a piece of choreography out there and there's people who's gonna love it, there's people who's gonna hate it, there's gonna be people who are feeling in between. Even like the best pieces out there, some people are gonna be like, I think it's kind of overhyped. Like, even watching like Broadway shows, somebody's gonna be like, I really love this one. And other people are gonna be like, I wouldn't agree with that. So it definitely is when it comes to being the creator in those situations, it's definitely like, okay, I want your opinion. And I'm going to take that to apply it into my thinking process and see if that makes sense for me, if that works. If that is helping me reach the goal I want for this project, whatever it may be, whether it's um, creating a dance piece or writing a song or writing a book, things like that. So that definitely makes sense. I find that that helps a lot of the time. As you know, I'm really bad at making decisions sometimes, like really big ones. So I'm like, hey, can I have your opinion on this? Can I have your opinion on this? Can I have your opinion on this? Like, or am I tripping? Am I in my head? Like, what's that? And so it definitely really helps to get opinions. I also think it's important to know who are the people you need to pull opinions from. You start to learn who are the people you probably shouldn't,
Oh yeah.
because maybe you're not in agreement like ever. So that's probably the key there.
Yeah, I feel like I need to do interviews now before taking feedback from people. I'm like, what are your favorite books? Because another thing that I've learned a lot about myself is that now that I've started paying attention to it, I tend to prefer stories that are a bit more niche, stories that are not going to have 4.5 stars on Goodreads, because they tend to be very divisive. And I'm usually a really big fan of those very divisive things when they hit my area, my wheelhouse of what I enjoy. So when it can be difficult to take, it may not be the best decision to take feedback from somebody who, they prefer like the most mainstream of story. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just different taste. So when something happens that is outside of that very comfortable space for them, they tend that's when they're like, you should change that. You should get rid of that. You should cut that. You should add this instead. Even things like language. That's been an interesting thing, especially in writing, where I get feedback from people where they're like, what does this mean? Or what is this word? And I'm like, it is a Googleable phrase or a Googleable word. I am not your English teacher. This is not even like an SAT word. It's like a 2 syllable. You just haven't seen it in this use. That's okay. But with where I'm at, it's learning to recognize those signals too of like, okay, that's this is maybe not the best fit for what I'm looking for. And that is also, I think, another area of like growth for me where I'm like being a bit more discerning in who I'm listening to.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because I actually am like curious of like to start rolling into that confidence level and how how feedback like that could also impact like the confidence building that you work on. Um, so that's like one question, and then two, I also wanted to talk about like what does it look like to choose to be vulnerable in those settings and share your work, or when you're doing those cold emails. I know you say it like cold emails, which I never thought of it like that, but that's so true. It is a cold email. And what does it look like to just say, bet I'm going to do it? How do you step out of that locked in place where you're holding into your work and then now you're like, okay, I'm going to set it free?
So your first to address your first question, it was on confident building that confidence and discerning.
Yeah, basically, like even while you're still sharing your work,
I
because
mean,
I assume there's definitely like it's kind of like that situation where you build up and then you share it. There's a knockback down in creative world. My equivalent to that is probably like going to an audition.
mm,
So yeah, I'm just curious about that. How do you build up again?
um, I think a lot of it can be time, but also your approach can matter a lot too. I One thing that I've started kind of like letting myself do is like letting myself have that first emotional reaction of like um earlier. I haven't been sending out queries in a really long time. It's been at least a couple of months because I've been working on an edit for the book that I was previously querying. But because it takes so long in the industry, I'm still getting like, you know, 6 months later, here's a rejection, here's this, here's that. And usually it's for me, I'm like, it used to be I'd be like, oh, I have to immediately like hop on this. If there's any shred of like feedback from agents where it's like, oh, I struggle with this. This is kind of these are sometimes you'll get the barest of things of like, I really enjoyed XYZ. I struggled with this. It's a no today. Thank you very much, sort of thing. And I used to immediately want to jump in and like, okay, so this is the problem. So how do I analyze that and how do I address that and how do I fix that so I can immediately like do that now? Well, I'm like, I know inside my heart, I'm like upset because I've had this rejection and I'm like, they didn't get it. How could they, you know, they must not have been doing XYZ right. They weren't paying attention. Well, and you can't really actually address something creatively while you're in that emotional space, or you do and you kind of do end up doing as much damage as, like, doing more damage than good, because you're like trying to do this thing to fix it for someone else's opinion before you've had a moment to like sit with those feelings and then think about, like I said, whether that is applicable here, because past a certain point it's no longer about quality, it's about taste. So if I sit back and I'm like, this person just gave me feedback on, like, I got a rejection earlier this week that talked about the only like kind of comment they made on it was they enjoyed the characters, but the magic system was overwhelming for them. And I was like, this time I was able to be like, I'm going to read that email. I'm going to put it down. I'm going to not, I'm going to sit with it for a bit. I'm going to see how I feel about it. I also, by having a bit more writing community now, we have this chat in one of my groups where we'll straight up post like, hey, just got a rejection. So we can all kind of like, we almost celebrate it at this point, because it's like,
Nice.
we know it sucks. So it's
Mhm.
better to be like, we'll send each other like ice cream reactions and those sort of things of like, have an ice cream, sit in your feels. It's kind of like a breakup. You, especially because some agents, they want you to like really, it's almost like a job interview where they want you to
Mhm.
like almost write a cover letter. They want you to know their taste, and like, so you end up getting invested in these potential relationships. And then when you get the rejection, it's like, oh, it's like a mini breakup, even though no
Yeah.
relationship has been started yet, but that potential.
Mhm.
So sitting with that feeling first and being like, ugh, that sucks. I'm really upset about this because I I feel X, Y, and Z about it. I talk to my friends about it. I'm like, it feels like, you know, unfair feedback, or I'm frustrated because this is, you know, 7 months later that you're getting back to me with this like 2 sentence thanks but no thanks, after we have, at least for this recent one that I had, we had exchanged a little bit more. They had asked for more pages and things like that. So I was like, oh, this is maybe going somewhere. So that build up
Yeah.
too of like, even though it feels like something is starting, you have no guarantee. You can get to that very final line and still get a no in the end, which is very normal. But the first time it happens, it sucks. So
Yeah.
being a bit more gentle with that. And as far as keeping that confidence for next time, I mean, like, there's obviously things you can do. I'm very much like a problem solver way to deal with those emotions. I'm like, okay, I'm going to analyze this and I'm going to figure out how to fix it, and then I'm going to fix it. And sometimes I just do the analysis and I'm like, here's some things I could do to address it. And I just keep those notes and I don't necessarily move on it as quickly as I used to, because it
Mhm.
ends up with a lot of mess. Especially with where this book is, a lot of the recent feedback I've had is about specifically like world building and magic and stuff like that. People saying they wanted more and more. So I added more. And now I get this person saying it's overwhelming. And I'm like,
Mhm.
so that's when I kind of identify this, like, this is a taste thing. This is, and then the question becomes not how do I make this better? It's okay, so this has a particular audience of, there's some people that really prefer a rich, deep, dense kind of magical world where you are rewarded by knowing more about the magic system or the history or the story, like high fantasy. That's, you think of something like Game of Thrones. That's whole histories of dynasties of royals that personally is not as much to my interest, and there's less magic in that story. It's a lot more like history and things like that. So contrasting that with like, it's just about the reader, like what are they looking for and trying to find the match there. So once you've reached that area of like, I have faith that my story is good and it is just about taste now and dialing in that taste, it's about finding the right match rather than making changes to make it what somebody else wants. Because
Mhm.
if you end up doing that, then you get so far away from what you wanted to do that you end up with something that could be disjointed, because some areas are kind of fitting your vision, some are fitting the imaginary vision of some random person's feedback that you had to interpret and turn into this whole thing. And it can get even more messy trying to follow that when you don't actually have any direction. So there's a lot to it, basically.
Yeah. No, it makes sense though because I think what I've discovered is, like no matter what craft you're in, whatever creative journey you're in, I think what's really key is like authenticity.
Mhm.
And so that's what it sounds like. It's like in the midst of all this, no matter what you're doing, you that can get lost in the sauce if you are always looking for um what other people are looking for.
Mhm.
Like I what I've noticed is the people who make it in general. I know it looks different in like publishing world a bit. And that I feel like authenticity would probably be more of a behind the scenes situation, for sure. But what I've seen for people who are more upfront in their creative sense is like they make it because people can relate to them.
Mhm.
Um, or I'm pretty sure it probably is the same as like can relate to what they're reading once it's finally out there. But that authenticity beforehand, I feel like is definitely I could see that definitely being a thing of someone's gotta be able to be like, "Oh, yes, I vibe with this," and then be ready to put it out there into the universe. So it's just about finding your match, and that's hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like it is very much like relationships almost where, you
Mhm.
know, so two people may not be a match, but that doesn't necessarily mean there's something wrong with either of them. It just they're not the right fit. And I
Yeah.
think also looking a bit more at like the kind of stories that I like and the kind of stories I don't like has been very informative because I'm like, I don't want to be like the most mainstream of writers. They are they're having their success moment and it's amazing to see for a lot of people, but if
Mhm.
I don't want to be exactly that, I don't need to necessarily concern myself with doing the exact same thing that they're doing.
Mhm.
It's and kind of accepting in myself that like I think I'm going to end up in something that is a bit more niche, and that's okay because that's the kind of stuff that I like reading. So
Yeah.
I don't. I never really wanted to be like a Suzanne Collins or a Stephanie Meyer, where like everybody knows your name kind of author. Um, that's a little too much for me. So kind of being realistic on like what are my goals? Like I want to put something out there that I'm proud of and the people who get it can really connect to. And that doesn't mean catering that story to every reader, every agent who says no, because they said no. So obviously that's already an indication that they're not the right fit. They can like certain parts of it, but if it's ultimately a no, then it's not necessarily anything wrong with the story. There are
Mhm.
obviously things that can still be fixed. I am currently in the middle of an edit doing that right now, but there's the meat of the story and the like soul of a story is not something that you should change just to appeal to somebody who's already said no to it.
Yeah. No, for sure. And actually, that's a good roll in for the next question I kind of wanted to bring in is like, so what? Just let the audience know. This is kind of like low key, like putting yourself out there a bit. I know, through for a loop. So, what are the goals? And I'll say mine too. I won't just put you on the spot. But like, what if someone were to say like, hey, what is it you want to do? And like with this, what is the perfect ideal situation that can happen in the next 5 years? Like within it, not 5 years later. Like within these next 5 years, like what is happening? What are your goals? What would you say?
I feel like it changes a lot depending on the mood, but I think I
Mhm,
moved a bit away from really wanting to have like that traditional publishing experience. First of all, because of the kind of state of things, the some of the business choices that are being made, I'm like, especially living in LA, you see the priorities of a lot of places, and it's first and foremost to make money, which is fine that they're a business, but that's less so my goal these days. I would much rather write something that is authentic and get it out there for people to enjoy, whether it's a much smaller audience than I was like initially dreaming of when I was young. So my goals now are a lot more like about my creative journey than like an outcome based thing. I want to finish I have a forever long to-do list. I want to try some new things. I want to expand my horizons. I want to take some classes because I feel like I have been very much a self-taught writer. So for the longest time, it's been a lot of like independent research and stuff like that. But I want to kind of maybe branch out and do some more workshops and things like that to hone myself creatively, especially while I'm getting a better sense of who I am as a writer rather than just trying to be very outcome focused of like I want to making goals for things that I can't control, like wanting to be published by X year, wanting to have this by X year, where there are so many other factors in that. And so I think it's a bit more realistic now.
If to because you know me, if you didn't have to do realistic and it was like you had like yeah, it was like the perfect like dream scenario, what do those numbers look like differently?
um, I mean, I don't have any number dreams, but I have always kind of in my heart wanted like I think about me growing up and like being really into something on Tumblr, like having like a really niche fandom for something where people are like obsessed with something and they read into everything and they care about it and they're willing to do a little bit more than just read something so they can write their, Goodreads review on it. So that is kind of more focused, more niche rather than like I I guess I didn't have as defined goals, but wanted kind of that more traditional almost like to famous kind of book where now I'm like, no, I'd rather have like a dedicated fan base of people who really care about it because that one I think is a bit more realistic, even though but it is I think closer to what I really want because, like I said, my taste is a lot more niche. So I'm like, I'm writing for me essentially, and so I want to find the me's that are really going to connect with the book. So I think that's kind of the dream is to like have people that actually care about it that'll do like on Tumblr people do a screenshot of something be like, oh my god, I can't believe we didn't notice, and talk about all
Mhm.
the what all this one paragraph means for the larger arc of this character, the story. Or
Yeah,
I would
like
love to
deep
have
dives.
yeah, or to have readers go back to book one when I don't know book 3 or 5 is out or something like that and be like,
Mhm.
can you believe that this was like it was laid out in the groundwork from book one, because I definitely by working on a lot of books in a series at once have been like let me that's going to be really funny in 3 books. So if I could get to a moment where there's somebody making those connections because enough of my work is out there and enough people are able to see it, that would be like the dream for me.
Yeah. See, that's cool though. And that makes sense because there's people like I get what you're saying and I guess I never considered that of sometimes books or authors get so big from books that sometimes it isn't just dedicated readers and like fans of the work. Sometimes just people reading it so they could hop on the trend.
Yeah.
I feel like that's become a thing of late now, especially with like TikTok and things. So no, that makes sense. And then you want people to really be there for it. Um, kind of create a community for them. That's cool. That makes sense. I like that.
Yeah, because that's what always appealed to me as a reader, like, is when I can connect to something and like kind of be a nerd about it, rather than like
Hmm.
it having that 15 minutes of fame on TikTok and selling a million copies. Like that's nice and obviously amazing for the people who had that experience.
Hmm.
It's just no longer being no longer what I'm really interested in realistically, because I'm like, yeah, I'd rather have people that care about it and
Hmm.
people that are still into it in like 10 years.
Yeah. Longevity.
Hmm.
Yeah. Oh, that makes sense. I am curious about what that looks like. So in regards, so we've talked about the opposite end of things where it's like, okay, sometimes when I'm doing art, um, when I'm really in my craft, I can feel like this. Can you describe any times where you're like, uh, I did my craft this time around instead of feeling like this, as in like, boo, tomato, tomato, you did, and you were like, wait, I ate that, and it kind of like built your confidence up, and like you were like having like the best moment. Have you had any of those recently where you were like, like maybe like a solid day, or I know it's up and down for me because I could be good one moment in one day and then not the next. But or it's like a solid, hour where you're like, oh, I'm on a roll and I'm doing a solid job.
Mm. I tend to have those moments more, I feel like, when I go back and revisit something I wrote a while ago, and I did do that recently. I wrote a short story kind of for myself to kind of get a sense of a certain group of characters that had been talked about but hadn't been like on page. And so I wanted to explore a little bit of this group of characters, and so I wrote the short story that was just kind of like to explore them, but also kind of have this plot moment as well. I can never just write a story with like I always end up putting plot important stuff, and then I'm like, well, okay. But I went and revisited that, and I was like, wow, this is one something different from what I had been doing. Like a pretty, I had been pretty focused in this one area, so this kind of branch out moment was cool to like get into certain other characters' point of view. Also, the like it was I was like really impressed with how the arc of the story went almost because I was like, oh, I like really effectively introduce a conflict and build the tension and then have this moment where like everything kind of breaks because everything kind of comes together because all these characters are kind of experiencing the same thing from different angles. And they're a bunch of siblings, so they like try and bring it up, but then somebody like makes a joke and then they're like, okay, whatever, I'm not going to talk to you about it. And so that like building of the tension through that and then bringing it together where they actually like come together and figure this out and have that I was just really impressed in how I did that, and I didn't even like try while I was writing it to be like, and now I'm building tension, and now I'm doing this. So it was I was impressed by how like natural it seemed, and how I didn't notice it before, but then revisiting it later, I was like, wow, I did kind of I ate like that was pretty good, and this is I guess the benefit of I don't always remember like the minute details of everything that I wrote, so coming back to something I laugh at my own jokes still and I'm like, wow, that was funny, like I can't believe like that I did that, wow.
Mhm. No, that's cool. That's what I was like. I wanted to ask that because I was like, those are moments that are also, that plays a part in the ups when the downs happen and stuff. And so, no, I'm glad that I got that from you because I was like, wait,
Mhm.
let me ask that. But I'm gonna go back because I realized I did say I would share,
Oh
and I
yes,
completely
yes,
forgot.
come on.
Um, so it's funny. I was talking to this with someone else last week, or like literally a few days ago, but at this point it feels like last week. But it was so just say dance first for a second, because I realized that as I've started developing my creator journey in general, like with TikTok and stuff, like I have ideas outside of dance that I would like to pursue. But so I'm gonna give you like the most random stuff. In the next 5 years, I want to be in like a really cool commercial, like a dance commercial, like a 5, 6, 7, 8, like. I had specific ideas in mind, but certain companies are not vibing with us these days, so I can't 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 go with those companies anymore. But
Hmm.
any company that is still vibing with us, I would love to do like a really cool like dance commercial. So like holiday commercials are always really fun.
Hmm.
I It's a hard one. This is one in regards to like me blocking myself because I lack the confidence to just like take the leap into that vulnerability. But eventually going back in to choreography because I kind of stopped doing it and sharing it. And so
Hmm.
what that looks like, that scary boots, but that would be in
Yeah.
a situation at some point because in the case scenario with dance, it's very much more public.
Hmm.
um, so that makes it hard because the internet is such a intriguing place. Let's just say that.
Oh yeah.
So when we're talking about judgment and needing like that steel, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, what else? What else? In regards to me just dancing, not needing to do choreography, I want to share me dancing a bit more. I want more dance experiences outside of classrooms.
Hmm.
So, but that's a hard one. Like, so how do I get to make sure to audition for things, or how do I get more experiences that doesn't involve me paying for it, but maybe having it for free, or maybe even getting paid myself for it? That is an ideal world of things. I've kind of let go of the strict need of needing to be like this Broadway audition girly because it seems like the easiest choice. It's the easiest choice in the sense of it's available often to audition. It is the hardest choice in regards to actually being seen for an audition and actually making it to a certain point, being a non-union person. I've seen people make it. It took them years. Some of the best dancers I know, um, but it took a long time, and I'm not where they are, which is perfectly fine. I'm definitely. I've discovered my strength is more of contemporary girl, like sounds like maybe like repertory versus like this like Broadway musical theater style world. And it doesn't have to be Broadway, of course, too, but living in New York City, it's kind of hard to be external elsewhere. And also being in New York City, it's very hard to be an adult who's still working a full-time job, um, and exploring that because everything is Monday through Friday, 10 AM. Like, so it's like, okay, I wanted to audition or I wanted to go to that experience and I can't go or show my face and start building community and stuff. So that's a hard one. Um, but yeah, I hope that made sense. I think that's one of figuring out for sure. Because a lot of the loops that I need to go through are things that I myself am blocking myself from.
Mm.
So that's just thing. And the question is why, Kavana? The answer is I don't have a 100% answer. But I do know that I haven't done choreography in a bit and I want to warm back up to that again. There's just a little bit of a blockage there. And I think a lot of that has to do with my previous job. So
Mhm.
working on that, figuring that out as well. But no, community is important, and I'm glad you also talked about it earlier too, because like I think what's super helpful is having friends and peers, and emphasis on like mentorship that does impact your growth. I do want to eventually get more into mentorship, be a mentee, not a mentor. But I find it really hard to just put myself out there and be like, hey, can you help me? I know we don't really know each other, or we kind of know each other. So that's what I'm working on, trying to build my community. But no, it definitely helps having people in your corner to help push you a little bit. It helps have an accountability partner as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think accountability is like part of it, but there's also sometimes you just need somebody to gas you up when you're like not feeling it. You're like, "Can you look at this like video I did? I see the problems with it." We in my writing community will refer to it as like a positivity pass of something where you just go through and you like highlight the stuff that you like and you say, "This is hilarious. I love this. Oh my gosh, this is my favorite character." All you're doing is just highlighting the stuff that is really working. And especially when you're like you've just created something but all you can see are the problems with it because it's a rough draft, so it's not going to be perfect on the first try. That's the point of various drafts. Sending it to somebody who you
Yeah.
can trust to just come back at you with love, and even if they are seeing all the same problems you are, they know that like right now what you need is the support, so you can
Mm.
get through to that. You can build that confidence again to be like, okay, now I can come back to it and be like, yeah, that was really cool. I Now let's fix this, but this part we're keeping because they're right, that was awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. I like the idea of like a positivity pass. That's actually really cool. I'm glad that that's a thing.
Yeah.
That makes so much sense too. Versus just like, hey, this is what I need right now.
Hmm.
So on the other things, just tell me what you like.
Yeah.
Because that's also very, very valid. In regards to um, you know, small actions. I'm curious what those baby steps look like for you continuing your art and continuing writing. Do you have any goals that you're doing now where you're like, okay, in number form, 3 times a week I'm doing this, or 2 times a week I'm doing that, or once a month at least checking this or rereading that. Do you have any of those that help keep you accountable when you're probably not in the best mindset?
Oof. I used to be very like driven on like I'm trying to write every day or I'm trying to hit this word count goal for the month. I do track my how many words I write, like, and that's also been interesting because I know some other people who will like track it and like post it as again kind of a accountability exercise of like if I want to write every day or if I want to write 1,000 words a week, then posting at the end of the month and being like, here's how many words I wrote this month, even if they're just for fun or exercise, or if they're part of serious projects or not. Like that is a good way for like both accountability and like account. Recently, I have not been as like strict on like I want to hit this word count or write this many times a week, because I've been kind of in a like trying to be a bit more gentle with myself with where my confidence levels have been at recently. And like letting myself rebuild a little bit. So rest time is also very important. Taking time to do what I like sometimes refer to them as like junk writing, not junk, but like writing something that isn't for this goal of like finishing this short story or finishing this novel or doing this edit. I'm just writing something just for the joy of it to be a little bit fun. So I'm trying to get a little bit more of that in. But I don't like going a week without writing, because then I'm like, definitely that means that there's something going on with me that like it's not happening. I'm not feeling my best. Maybe I just need to sit down and write something a little bit fun just to get the words flowing again. I'm also trying to read a bit more because I have been
Mhm.
historically quite bad at reading, but that is one of the places I get the most like inspiration to want to go and write is by reading other people's stuff. So that's I've been doing a bit more of that as well. And yeah, I'm much more in my rest era at the moment, which is very
Mhm.
important. It's just not staying stuck in it for too long. So that is I'm coming around to the end of that rest era, I think, and move.
Okay. Moving on to the next one. Okay. Moving on to like, what is the opposite of rest era? Do you call it like energized?
Yeah, I
Like,
know. I in my personal life, not just in writing, I use GYST, get your shit together, as like a. It's like some people
ah,
do like their hard 75 or like those sort of things. Like I'll be like, this
yeah.
month is a get your shit together month.
Mhm.
Very much like I'm trying to actually hit all these goals. I'm not
Mhm.
tracking just to see how often I'm doing it. I'm like trying like really going for it, or I'm making these editing goals and then doing everything I can to meet them. So much of life
Mhm.
has been in the way of those recently. So as of trying
Mhm.
to make some more time for it is also good. But
Mhm.
time measurement can be a good thing too, of like I don't care how many words I do this month, I want to write for 10 minutes every day. 10 minutes is super manageable. Even if you write 10 words or you write 100
Yeah, that's true.
words, like you can say I have made progress today.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, and also like the hard 75. So I tried to do like a 30 soft because I was
Okay.
like 75 is a commitment, and not to say I couldn't, but I was just like, I want to warm up into it. If I give myself the number 75, I'm gonna like shake it. And
Mm.
then, as you hear, I said tried. So I was like, at a certain point, I kind of fell off, and I was like, we're gonna just restart again, probably in April.
Mm.
To reevaluate what those goals are. I was having a hard time immediately with like I want to be able to choreograph and have a choreograph moment in like a session. I was doing 10 minutes, but I was like, then I put myself to schedule 3 times 10 minutes. So like 30 minutes total. I was like, maybe that is a little bit too much pressure right now, considering that. I was like, maybe I should have just said at least 10 minutes a week, just because maybe that's where I need to warm up to first. And then once, maybe the next 30 of that, to build up to that 75 could eventually get there. Or if I'm like 15 in and I'm like, wait, like last week went really well, add on to a bet. Um, or what did I also have? I had other things too. I stayed on top of like pretty well. Like I've been very health conscious this month, which
Mhm.
stayed remained. But as far as like creatively, that didn't really stick as much because I also wanted to like post dance videos. I have a goal on my bingo sheet to post 24 dance videos this month. Not this month, this year.
Mm.
I have not hit those marks yet compared to the amount of months we've had so far. Um, so it's math. It's
Yeah.
figuring it out.
And also,
Um,
one
mhm,
thing that has been helpful for me is like you can't focus on everything at once. I've also been a
mhm,
little bit more focused on like my health journey. I'm trying to like actually get my body moving a lot more because it was starting to affect my life, where I was like, why do I feel old? I am not old. I need
mhm,
to not feel old. So
mhm,
trying to like push myself in those areas. Obviously, I'm going to have to take some sacrifices somewhere, so I'm not going to be hitting those
yeah,
crazy word counts that I've done in the past. Um,
mhm,
well, a pretty common one that people do. November is a big month for it. National Novel Writing Month in November, though been a lot of love lost for the people that run NaNoWriMo. So a lot of people will refer to it as
Mm,
like Big Word Month instead, and you can do it for any 30-day month.
mhm,
Trying to write 50,000 words in a month, because that's a novel length amount of words. So write a novel in a month.
mm,
All you have to do is write 1665 words a day, and you've crushed it. And sometimes it's a lot more possible than others. The first time that I did NaNoWriMo, I was in college. I had a lot of free time. I wrote 100,000 words in a month. They were not great 100,000 words, but I wrote them.
but you still wrote, yeah,
And I have
exactly.
also tried to do it before and struggled my way through it and didn't make it because life gets in the way sometimes. But that's
Mhm,
I feel like a month is a good like chunk of time to like a soft 30, like you said, it
mhm,
is feels a lot more manageable when you're first starting out, because if you try to go 0 to 100 the first weekend, you're going to be, one, not meeting the goals very likely, and two, feeling really down about
mhm.
yourself for not meeting these goals that were way too high for what you should have expected of yourself when you're first starting out.
Exactly. Yeah. And so that's why I noticed I thought I was because I had already started like the health process, I had already started that beforehand when I did like the sugar detox and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, that's a continuation, but just holding myself accountable. And then but it was like the dance stuff. So like, yeah, putting it all I realized I was like, I think putting it all in was it started to be like, oh my gosh, like all my eggs in one basket at once kind of thing. And so that's the thing. That is like the like kind of like 30 soft kind of thing. But I was kind of doing my own version of what I needed. Because a lot of them are like, "You're supposed to do this or that," and I was like, "No, I'm gonna do what I need for me." So, 'cause some people do sugar detox for 30, the 30 soft or 30 hard or whatever, depending, and I'm like, I don't need to do sugar detox anymore." Like, I'm keeping track of my things. What I need is to find myself in my creative journey again and what that looks like. So I need to reevaluate that. I keep looking because 'cause I'm like, it's literally sitting on my wall. I stopped tracking it the week before last. Yeah. I was tracking stuff and then it fell off when I got busy. But yeah, that's a hard one. But
Yeah.
it's figuring out. I think it's just understanding where you are. It's a good to reflect where you are and where you want to be so then you can understand like what's missing and where can you like level up
Mm-hmm.
as they say. um okay, so to start wrapping up, I do want to ask then um in regards to like closing thoughts and things um for these next few months into the year because we still got a whole chunk of the year left. What is next for you? What do you want to happen? And what do you want to make sure you do in this time frame? Like, are you gonna do kind of like a big month writing this year? What is the idea? More queries, things like that.
I I started an edit at the beginning of this year, and I have been kind of slacking on it. I'm on chapter 10 out of 25 when I was like, my biggest issues when editing are when I take too long because the flow gets off. I need to like actually have some sustained editing time, so I'm not like constantly having to go back and be like, did I do that already? Am I just kind of repeating myself because I forgot what I wrote 2 months ago? And I really fell off of that. So I need to finish this edit, and I need to do it without it being like chapters a month. I have another like kind of fun book that is a little bit less stress in mind that I want to finish this year. It's, I think, very doable, because at least the first draft would be very doable. So that might be a big writing month kind of goal. Next time, April's a 30-day month, so probably not April, but maybe June. Um, Potentially, it'll depend a lot on what's going on in those months. And then I have on my bingo sheet for the year, write 3 short stories. I have written 0. So also on my list is to do some sort of writing class or workshop. So I am thinking maybe doing a combo of that and doing a short story workshop, and trying to develop something with that. So then I can, again, it's without having to put all my eggs in one basket of, I want to write an entire novel and have it here. It's so much trying to take a smaller piece of something to work that muscle instead, I think will be very rewarding for me. And yeah, just in general, trying to meet my goals, but also not be so hard on myself with those things because that's usually where my creativity dies when I'm like looking at the goals that I've set and I'm like, oh, I didn't write 5,000 words a day. And it's only 3 days into the month. I've already failed. So I guess I'll just give up now. It's like, no, like you can bring it back. Like also be more realistic with your goals, silly goose, because 5,000 words a day is not possible when working full time. I've never had that,
Yeah.
but uh,
Listen, yeah, it's so important too because it's hard. It's hard to be a creative building and then also still being a full-time employee.
mhm.
That's a rough one. But yeah, I talked about that for listeners. I talked about that in an episode with my friend Chris. We talked about like what does that look like to be a 9 to 5er and a creative builder. So definitely check that out. But yeah, that's a whole shebang that it's hard to for it's hard because you wanna be able to forget that you have to incorporate the 9 to 5 in.
Mhm.
But I'm figuring it out, I'm figuring it out. I'm trying to get there,
Yeah,
and balancing that out in a better way. And I
and
definitely think I can now that I'm not a teacher.
yeah, definitely. I made some changes in that area to be a bit kinder to myself, where I'm not working a job that requires me to do a bunch of overtime and like be
Mhm,
stressed when I'm not working, so I can't write. So that's been a good positive change. And now it's exiting my rest era and getting back to a bit more of a get your shit together era, so I can actually
mhm.
finish the goals that I had for this year. We'll see.
Yep. Mhm. It'll happen, it'll happen. It'll just,
It will.
like, not to fall back into the goal is not to fall back into a intensive rest era, because I know that can happen to me too, especially, like, if I'm not vibing and just, I don't know, down, but, I think I've been doing better at that
Yeah,
this year. Like, I was off to a really good start, so I wanna keep that and remain that going. But yeah, I'm glad we talked about this, Nicole, because this is like a good check-in to see like what's going on. I feel like for listeners, it's very relatable. There's a lot of people who are out there creatively, um, who want to do something and haven't figured it out yet, whether it is a confidence situation or if it's something else that's layered within confidence as well. I feel like that could also be a thing of, oh no, I can't do it because I don't have time. But it's like having confidence in yourself to make that time for you to be able to do it.
yeah. If you want it,
Um,
you got. It's worth it for you to focus your time on that. And
mhm,
if there are other things that you have to put less emphasis on to make it happen, if it's something that matters to you, make the time for it. Have the
yeah,
confidence in yourself that it's going to be worth it for you, even if it's
mhm,
just for joy and it's not, for all these dream outcomes this year. The progress you make now and the time you invest in yourself is important.
no, seriously, yeah, and if you wouldn't be thinking about it if you didn't want it or if it couldn't happen. Yeah, I
Exactly.
always think about that one too, so, that's very true, but thank you again, Nicole, for hopping on to talk about this. I know it's, like, a very vulnerable topic, but I feel like it's also good to, like, because it's very like, authentic, it's very honest, and so,
Yeah.
I think that's good. Listeners, thank y'all for listening. Make sure you go ahead and check out what Nicole is doing at nsours.com. In addition to that, make sure you're following me at the Introvert Social Hour on TikTok and also on YouTube. And then you're also staying up to date on this podcast wherever you're listening. So make sure you're following so you know when the episodes are dropping. Nicole's bio is in the description, so go make sure you check them out. And just make sure you have a wonderful time, get some sunshine, get some air. Have a great week, and I will see you next week on the Introvert Social Hour. Bye.